Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to your Daily Penguin, our book-by-book tour through my Penguin Classic wall. I didn't get a chance to do it in 2019 when I did a library tour, and then I thought, well, do a library tour of the Penguin wall when 2020 starts, when you get back in 2020. But that seemed wrong, too, to do a standard library tour where I set up the camera and I just take down one book after another or a whole shelf. These books have meant the world to me. I go back to them more often than I do to any other books that I have. So, I decided instead to do a Daily Penguin, and we are slowly making our way through this whole wall. My little schnauzer Frida, you can see a little embroidery of her there, has been a fixture in these videos. She's not going to be in this one because she is sound asleep, pressed against the small of my back. So she's, to me, she feels like she's in this video, but you can't see her. And yesterday we had a contentious Daily Penguin. Yesterday I talked a little about Penguin Classic's excellent volume of collected translated writings by the pig Martin Luther, and it was contentious. I kind of knew ahead of time that it would be, that a lot of you are probably Lutherans, or at the very least Protestants, and that maybe you've been raised to think in venerative terms about this person, or maybe you've read some of his writing, or know some of his historical contributions to the German language, or to biblical research, and you don't have such a admittedly acidic opinion of him as I do. I hadn't expected quite the response I got. Of course, I leave my email on every video, so anybody's free to reach out to me at any time about anything. And I heard a lot. I heard from a lot of people about my opinions on Martin Luther. And, you know, I have to say, a lot of people were offended. A lot of people were, if not offended, you know, deeply argumentative, saying, you know, I'm not offended here, because a lot of people told me, I have since left any kind of religious faith. I wasn't offended. But I do disagree completely with your dismissal of this figure on a number of different levels. And I was reading those emails and answering back to them, and I realized after about 20 minutes, and this is reflected in the comments as well on the video, that I have just the best viewers in the world. I mean, I realized after about 20 minutes of returning those emails what I was actually doing. That after about 20 minutes, I realized, well, what you're doing here is engaging all sorts of highly spirited email debates about Reformation theology with a bunch of strangers who are at the same time sending you pictures of their dogs and cats. So I just thought it was fantastic. I have often maintained that this little corner of BookTube, where you know, all the channels that frequently creep up in recommendations and your algorithms for this corner. Not every corner of BookTube, but I've frequently maintained that our little corner of BookTube is just fantastic. By and large, just fantastic. That we all know, we get it. We all get it. We know how to strongly disagree with each other while still staying friends who would do anything for each other. That's valuable. That's really valuable. Certainly has picked me up quite a bit this week to see that. But our Penguin today is not contentious, or rather, isn't anymore contentious. Once upon a time, it would have been. But it's the complete poems of Walt Whitman in this lovely big fat edition. That is not an Eakins painting on the cover. That is actually an homage to Eakins. But nevertheless, the choice is apt, right? Because for the reasons why this would have been controversial, say, 20, 30, 50 years ago. Because there's a very easily readable subtext in a lot of Walt Whitman's poetry that wasn't acceptable in his own day, although he was deeply admired by other, I don't want to say closeted, gay men. They weren't just closeted. Closeted implies social pressures. They were also closeted by legal pressures. You could do hard labor. You could be executed. One way or another, gay men who couldn't express what they were read Whitman and loved him for that. They knew exactly they didn't need a roadmap to that subtext. And this is edited by Francis Murphy, who does a fantastic job. Just fantastic. Unobtrusive and exhaustive. So that if you want, the notes are all at the back, so that if you want any information at all about the subtext, the facts, the background, provenance of the poem that you have just read, you can feel free to go to the back of the book, and you will learn everything in an easily digestible way that you need to know about the details of that poem. But you won't be bothered on the page. That Whitman, you don't need much help with a lot of his poetry. The one quibble that I would have with this, of course, you need a complete edition, right, of any poet. You need a complete edition. Penguin has a million of them we're going to encounter. We have encountered plenty. We're going to encounter plenty more. The one quibble that I have with complete editions of any kind is that they don't allow the individual works to sort of stand and breathe on their own. Here you have hundreds and hundreds of Whitman poems. And you have the famous ones, like Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself, but you also have tons and tons of other things, too. Occasional verse that he tossed off. Problematic verse that he worked on and then reworked on and then reworked on and couldn't ever get quite right. You have little volumes of poetry that he wrote and published, but that we don't remember anymore. And not all of it is top-notch. And it's all mixed together here. You have all of it together. The defense here, I'm not really criticizing this volume. That's just a quibble that I have. And the defense, of course, is that you're not ever intended to read this book just seriatim. You're not supposed to read it just from front to back. You're supposed to dip in as you please, all with the convenience of one volume. We have the complete Wordsworth we saw in 2 volumes, the complete Keats, the complete Shelley, the complete Whitman. I'm sure that we're coming up on other complete poems. I really like this volume, as you can tell from it's kind of in a little bit beaten up shape. This tends to be the Whitman that I go to. I have a big hardcover of Leaves of Grass that I really like, but this tends to be the one I go to, specifically for Murphy's critical underpinning. I will read the poems, of course, but you can get the poems online. You can get the poems anywhere. It's for the scholarship that this editor brings to this volume. I typically, when I go back to this, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, okay, I know Whitman wrote a poem at such and such a time that addressed such and such a news event of his day, but I don't quite know the specifics, and I'm not quite sure where I would find them online, so I'll just go to this volume. Although often when that happens, I've mentioned before that I will often patrol this wall. I will just wander around back there. I do it all the time. It's a little bit too far away. This is going to seem a little bit strange to some of you, but the little book room here is a little bit too big. What I'd like is for that wall to be about 6 feet closer. I'd like there to be about 2 feet between the bottom of the bed and that wall. 2 feet between the bottom of the bed and that wall is just big enough for a bed of blankets for Frida if she chooses to do that. She doesn't ever choose to do that. Hardly ever chooses to do that. Her place of preference is exactly where she is right now, wedged against me somewhere on the bed. She is the 80 millionth dog that I've had that would consider sleeping on the floor to be a punishment. But I go for the smallest usable room with a window that I can find anywhere that I ever fetch up and turn that into this little book room. And this one's big, but I'll take what I can get. The smaller the better. I don't need a big room. But when I patrol that wall, I do often pull this down. And I may do it for that factual reason where, what is the underpinning of this particular poem? But I end up reading more of Whitman. He's grown on me over time, very much so. And so this volume has seen its share of wear and tear. So your penguin for today is a recommend, of course. If you're not familiar with this poet, you should become familiar with him, especially if you're an American. But even if you're not, even if you're just a fan of poetry, Whitman changed poetry quite a bit. And a lot of his stuff in this volume, I couldn't help but notice, I was flipping through it before I made this video, a lot of his stuff is filler, it's make-weight. And then you'll be even rambling around in that filler, maybe in a later poetry volume or a dashed-off thing. And then suddenly, either in that make-weight poem, you'll come across something, a line or a concept that's startlingly beautiful. Or you'll finish with a make-weight poem and hit something that no one else could have written. I love that. I absolutely love that. So it's a collected volume of poetry for today's Penguin. It's the complete poems of Walt Whitman. I'm going to see what I can do to prettify this book before I put it back on the shelf. But that's your Penguin for today. Precious little that's contentious about it. And we'll hope for a peaceful sailing tomorrow. So I'll wrap this up now, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.